Let's spend a day at the office in the United States. Hi there, everyone. I'm Jeff, and you are listening to Plain English. Here at Plain English, we use stories to help you upgrade your English. Our stories help you think in English, and by listening, you'll also learn how to express your best ideas in your new language. Well, today's story is all about office culture in the U.S. What's a typical office workday like? What do people wear? What time do they arrive in the morning? We'll talk about all that today. And in the second half of the lesson, before we wrap up, I'll show you exactly how to use the phrasal verb wrap up. JR is the producer of Plain English. He has decided that today's episode number is 704, and so he has uploaded the full content to plainenglish.com/704. That's where you'll find the transcripts, translations, quizzes, and exercises. plainenglish.com/704. Before we dive into today's story, you've heard me mention some of the great ways our Plus membership can help you upgrade your English, and you might be curious about what that looks like. We've recently unlocked some free samples so that you can try out the premium features for yourself. Even if you don't join, you'll still learn something from the sample lessons. Sound good? Look for the link that says free samples at the top of plainenglish.com. I've also put a direct link to the samples at the bottom of the show notes of this episode. Now, we're ready to start today's story. If you've seen the American version of the television series The Office, you might wonder how the United States ever became an economic superpower. Do American workers really spend all their time planning parties, playing pranks, and pursuing office romances? Thankfully, the answer is no. In this story, you'll learn about what office culture really is like in the United States. And no, it's not really like what you see on Suits or Succession either. Before we start, you should know that this story is about broad generalities. Every industry is different. Every company is different. I'll tell you about the average experience of an office worker in a private business. Let's start with how people get there. The overwhelming majority of workers drive alone in their cars to work. In big cities with established public transit, many workers do take the subway or commuter trains. A handful take a bus, and only a small percentage carpool. A lot of offices in the suburbs or smaller cities offer free parking, but commuters to big city centers usually have to pay by the month for their own parking. Now, the schedule. Most businesses have general guidelines about the workday. The most common workday is 8:30 in the morning to 5:30 in the afternoon. But most office workers have some freedom of schedule. They don't have to be there at 8:30 on the dot. In most places, 7:30 is considered early, 9:30 is considered late. Most offices have one or two early birds that arrive at 7 o'clock or before, but the office really starts to fill up between 8 and 9. That's the beginning of the workday. What about the end? The end is much more fluid. 5:30 is about when many people wrap up their office workday. A lot depends on how busy they are, what time they started work, and how much they got done during the day. But many people work later than 5:30. In some businesses, the employee handbook may say that the workday ends at 5:30, but the culture and expectation is for people to work later than that. A standard work week is 40 hours, but this is not a limit or a government policy. Americans work an average of 45 hours per week. About 40% of full-time workers put in 50 hours per week, while 18% put in 60 hours or more per week. Individuals often decide the specific amount of time they work. Certainly, the culture in a company or an industry affects working hours, but this is also about the work culture and how people get ahead. Individuals are often rewarded for their own specific performance. So those who are motivated to advance in the company or to make more money, they work more hours. In many companies, it is absolutely true that some people work harder or longer than others, even if they are at the same level and even if they have the same job description. With remote work now, many people leave the office early, 4:30, 5 o'clock, let's say, and then they connect again later in the evening. This allows people to pick up kids, have a family dinner, and get kids to bed. But it's very, very common for people to connect for an hour or two, sometimes more, at night. American office workers send emails after hours. Even if they're not sitting at a computer, many workers check their phones and respond to emails, honestly, up until their bedtime and often as soon as they wake up. Not everyone does this, but it is common. People feel pressure to stand out individually and to get a lot done during their work day. So it won't surprise you that long lunches are not part of the work culture. About half of workers eat lunch alone at their desks. An hour-long lunch break is considered long unless the lunch is also combined with a meeting. Office workers have the freedom to take small breaks during the day. Nobody is watching or counting. It's very common for coworkers to socialize a little bit during the workday or to escape for coffee together in the afternoon. But this isn't formal, and not everyone takes a break at the same time. People grab a few minutes when they can, if they can. After work social activities really depend on the specific office. Every office is different, but it's common for coworkers, either the whole office or smaller groups of colleagues, to go out for drinks after work. This is less common If most people have long commutes and kids at home, it's more common in younger offices in city centers. Communication at the office is professional but not formal. Almost anyone who works together on the same team calls each other by their first names. I can count on one hand the number of times I addressed someone as Mr. or Ms. I would call CEOs and CFOs of companies by their first names. That is what is expected. Unlike in some cultures, age isn't automatically rewarded with respect and deference. In most American office cultures, people advance and get promoted for their accomplishments. It's often true that the older you get and the more experience you have, the higher you advance. But it doesn't always work that way. Many people have bosses, supervisors who are younger than they are. That can be uncomfortable at first, but sometimes that's just how it works. Dress expectations have changed recently. A very few industries still expect workers to be in formal dress every day. That's a suit and tie for men. But these are the exception. There's a term in English called business casual. That means dress pants, a shirt with a collar, maybe a sport coat, and formal shoes, no sneakers. Business casual is the most common way of dressing in the office. But many offices have now relaxed their dress expectations. This is good because it allows workers to be more comfortable and more creative, more individualistic with their wardrobes. But make no mistake, people are still judged on their appearance. You still do have to look good, even if you're not in the standard business casual uniform. I've been watching Suits lately on Netflix, and now I know what it must feel like for a doctor to watch a hospital drama like ER or Grey's Anatomy, or for a police officer to watch Law and Order. The idea on Suits of what business is like, it's just so far from reality. They do get some things right on Suits, but the way they depict work on there, it just makes you cringe. But any show that accurately depicts someone's job is not a show anyone else would want to watch. Wrap up. Wrap up is a phrasal verb that means to finish something successfully. You use wrap up with a process, something that takes a bit of time. And you usually say it when you choose to end the process because you have achieved your objectives. Not because time ran out, but you finish it because it's a success. This is a very common phrasal verb to use at work. So let's imagine you're in a meeting. The objective of the meeting was to discuss the candidates for a new job. After an hour, you've had a good discussion, but you don't have a decision yet. You can say, we need to wrap up here, so let's make a final decision. That means we need to finish this meeting successfully, so let's make our decision. Now let's imagine you're giving a training seminar. The seminar is scheduled to last all day until 5 o'clock in the afternoon. But you're the teacher, you realize that the people in the class already know a lot of what you're teaching. So it doesn't take as long as you thought it would. Here's what you can say. We wrapped up at 3 o'clock because everyone knew so much about the topic. We wrapped up at 3 o'clock means we finished the training seminar successfully at 3 o'clock. Many Americans work in an office culture where the end of the workday is not strictly defined. All offices have their own cultures, but in my experience, not everyone stands up and leaves at exactly the same time every single day. Each person can decide when to wrap up for the day. If you got in at 7 o'clock and had an amazing day, you got a lot done without any interruptions, you may decide to wrap up at 3:30 or 4 o'clock. That's a good day. You got a lot done and you left early. Good job. But now picture a different kind of day. Imagine you got in late at 9:30, and imagine that during the day you got distracted. You spent some time chit-chatting. You engaged in some pointless email debates. All of a sudden, it's 4:30. You still haven't gotten a lot done. You might not wrap up until 8 o'clock that night. You might not finish your workday successfully until 8 o'clock. So when we use wrap up, we indicate when we finished what we needed to do. We wrap up the meeting when we've made the decision we needed to make. We wrap up the training seminar when we've covered all the material we needed to cover. We wrap up a workday when we've finished a good full day's worth of work in that day. You can use wrap up with things that are less associated with a time too. When you wrap up a project, you finish it successfully. I used to work in consulting, so we did a lot of projects for our clients. That's what consulting is. And I often was working on 2 or 3 or 4 projects at once. Now, here's something that happened to me a lot. I would get like 95% of the way through one project. Everyone was happy. And then my attention would drift to the next project coming in the door. And my boss would tell me, Jeff, can we please wrap up that old project? That means, can we get that last 5% done successfully? Can we wrap it up? Can we please finish it successfully? I've been on the other side of that conversation too. I've hired consultants and contractors to help me here in plain English. And sometimes they do a great job, but the last couple of tasks just seem to take forever. And so sometimes I say to them, let's wrap this up by the end of the week. That means let's finish this task or let's finish this project successfully by the end of the week. So what happens right about now? Every Monday and Thursday, right around this same time, we wrap up another audio episode of Plain English. We finish it successfully. I finish recording it. You finish listening. It's a good, successful job all around. But if you're not ready to wrap up just yet, if you don't want the experience to end, if you want to do more with what you've learned on today's episode, then you can of course do that at plainenglish.com/704. That's where you'll find the transcripts, translations, quizzes, exercises, and practice areas. plainenglish.com/704. We'll be back with a new episode on Thursday. Coming up on Thursday, it's a big question that most Americans will face at one point in their lives. The question is, buy or rent? We'll walk through the dynamics of that question on Thursday. You've reached the end of the audio lesson, but there's a lot more to the Plain English experience on the website plainenglish.com. A lot of plainenglish.com is free, but the best tools to help you upgrade your English are part of the Starter and Plus memberships. And if you've ever been curious about what those look like, well, I have good news for you. We've unlocked some free sample lessons that let you try out the Starter and Plus features for yourself. There are 2 easy ways to find the free samples. First, at plainenglish.com, there's a new link at the top of the page that says Free Samples. I've also put a link in the show notes for this episode. In the sample lessons, you can do the exercises, listen to the fast audio, take one of our toolkit workshops, practice your writing, and more. So try it out today. Click the link in the show notes of this episode or find the link that says Free Samples at the top of plainenglish.com.